Hello and welcome to the Cyberden, your weekly dose of tech and games. I, Jake, will be chatting with professional voice actor and veteran radio DJ Steve Downs, better known as the voice of the Master Chief from the Halo series. Thanks for coming, mate.
Jake, it's my pleasure. I'm looking forward to it. How are you?
All's well on the Cyberden, thank you.
Excellent.
Now, Steve, before you entered the world of voice acting, you spent many years on the radio. So please tell everyone listening, what inspired you to pursue this career path?
To be honest with you, I thought it would be a little more of a secure journey than being a drummer in a rock and roll band, which was my first inclination. But I felt like probably the career potential there was not great. And I was in rock bands as a kid, growing up in grade school and high school and college, actually. And the band got to a point where we had to sort of make a decision as to how much further we were going to go with it. And I had a rare case of common sense, if you will, and decided that maybe being a drummer in a rock band was probably not the best way for me to go. But I wanted to do something that would keep me close to the music, which was my first love. And I started working for the college radio station, thinking that would be a good entree into the music business. And once I got on the air, the ham and the ego in me took over, and I just couldn't let it go. And I was having too much fun. And this was, back in the late 60s, early 70s, when radio over here, at least rock radio, was freeform, and we could pretty much play whatever we want. And I just got hooked and fell in love with it and kept doing it ever since.
So what was it like working on the radio back in the 80s and 90s and so on, compared to today? Well,
very different. In fact, as I said, my first radio job was 1971, something like that. And back then, what we would call here in the States progressive rock radio or underground rock or acid rock, it was all freeform. I mean, we just played whatever we wanted to. I came in with a stack of albums under my arm, and whatever I felt like playing, I played. Once the format got successful, that's when corporations stepped in and realized they could make money on it. And slowly but surely, the fun over the years started to become whittled away with corporate takeovers. But even in the 70s and 80s, and to a certain extent in the early 90s, there was still a lot of fun, a lot of creative ways to express yourself and that sort of thing. I retired from full-time radio in 2015, and mainly because for the last, maybe 4 years before that, it wasn't that much fun anymore. The things that brought me into the business were no longer available to me. And so it was time to let others sort of take over. But back in, certainly the 80s, I was working in Los Angeles for most of the 80s. And, that was the hair band era. And, Motley Crue would drop by the studio, and all the LA hair bands, up to and including Guns N' Roses were, these were people who you not only played on the radio, but chances are they listened to you because most of them lived there. And I remember once I did an interview with Van Halen, and it was funny because Alex Van Halen was a fan of mine as much as I was a fan of his, which was sort of, an unusual, situation for a disc jockey. But, I had a lot of fun in the 80s and 90s. Most of it I can remember, some of it I can't, but it was a good time nonetheless. And I have a lot of fond memories of those times.
So what would you say were some of your fondest memories during said 4 decades of radio DJing? Or is it just like so many great moments, so many fun moments that it's difficult to actually pick out any?
It is somewhat difficult, but I mean, it was just I came from, I was born and raised in the Midwestern part of the country. And when I got to Los Angeles, which had always been my dream, in the late '70s, I mean, I was like a kid in a candy store. I mean, it was just was too good to be true, and being able to be on the air in the greatest entertainment city in the world, and like I said, at that point, L.A. rock was really starting to blossom in a big way, and to be sort of in the midst of all that was just outstanding. One of my favorite memories was there was a big festival out here, and when that would have been in 1980, 81, 82. It was called the US Festival, and it was a big rock festival. It was put on by one of the founders of Apple Computers, Steve Wozniak, who had probably more money than sense, and basically threw a huge party and invited all his favorite musicians, and he just turned into this big festival. Anyway, the station I was working at the time, KLOS, broadcast live from there, and Van Halen was there, Guns N' Roses was there, you name it, they were all there. The Clash, and it was just, we're going backstage, and they're coming out to our broadcast facility, and it was for somebody like me, it was just a childhood's dream come true, and I look back on it with a lot of fond memories. Not all of which, like I say, I really remember, but I think I remember the good parts anyway.
Do you have any thoughts to share on contemporary radio these days?
Of course, my only frame of reference would be, the radio here in the States. But I guess, I guess the best way to put it is it ain't what it used to be. I think the problem for a lot of reasons, because of, the corporatization of radio, and also the competition with the internet and with satellite radio and blogging, and there's just so many different outlets that a person can go to now for their entertainment. What's happened is, for young talent who want to come up in the business, like I started, as I said, at my college radio station, and then my first job after that was a tiny little station in Athens, Ohio. Our commercial promo used to be, "We're the only station in town," and that wasn't a joke. We were the only station in town. So you either listened to us or you weren't listening to the radio. But the point is, it was a way for young talent to get a start. And now that doesn't happen. That very same radio station right now probably has, sort of farms in talent via syndication and satellite from LA and New York and Chicago and whatnot. So there's no place for a young guy just getting started, or a woman just getting started, to have a place to go. And it's a shame. So I think people who have, want to have a creative outlet need to look probably elsewhere than radio. Now, you can look on the internet, and there's a lot of places you can go there, which is great. And a lot of different outlets that you can express yourself creatively. The only problem with that is there's not a lot of ways to actually make money doing it. So, it's sort of a conundrum there. But I'm not real crazy about the state of radio these days. Not that it's all bad. There's a station here in Chicago, WXRT, that's still very exciting and creative. And there's, a few stations like that throughout the country that still have creative outlet, where there's interesting things going on musically and that kind of thing. But yeah, again, I go back to the phrase, it ain't what it used to be.
So what inspired you to give voice work a try?
When I was in Los Angeles, well, actually, when I was in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, disc jockeys would make their own commercials. We would, commercial would come in for a local record store or whatever, and we would write the copy and record it and put the music with it, and basically produce a radio commercial. And I really got into that. I really enjoyed it. And when I went to Los Angeles, I started doing more of that. And I would do commercials for new records that are coming out or concerts that were coming to town, those kind of things. And I really liked all of the, not only voicing it, but putting it together and editing the music and all that kind of thing. I just had a love for it. And then in Los Angeles, that was and still is to a large degree, the hub of voiceover, commercial voiceover, gaming voiceover, animation, all of that. And I really got into doing that and thought that I might have had an aptitude for it, and got myself an agent. And next thing you know, it ended up being sort of a side career. Radio was still my bread and butter, but, the voiceover thing, and mainly commercial voiceover, was a new thing that I could be able to express myself creatively in. That it was another creative outlet, and I pursued it with some amount of vigor at that point, and still do, and I still enjoy doing voiceover to this day.
Well, let's move on now to your contributions to the iconic sci-fi first-person shooter, the Halo series. The golden question. How did you get the role of the Master Chief for the first Halo game, and what was the auditioning process like? Was it like any other?
It was unlike any other, Jake, because it's certainly been, from my voiceover career, the biggest thing that ever happened to me. Sort of ironically, it was a job I never auditioned for. When Bungie first started, who were the creators of the originators of the Halo series, and did Halo 1, 2, and 3 and Halo Reach, they were based in Chicago, where I am right now, where I'm speaking to you now. And Marty O'Donnell, who is the one who cast all the voices for the first 3 games and wrote a lot of the music and actually performed a lot of the music, he used to listen to me on the radio, and actually called me in about a year prior to Halo Combat Evolved, called me in to voice a character in another game that they were working on, a small little PC game. And we got along well. It went well, I think, and all that. And about a year later, he called me again and said, well, we're working on another game here. I think you would be right for this character, Master Chief. Would you like to come in? And I said, of course, and came in and did it. So I never actually auditioned for it, which is bizarre for my experience, to have the biggest and most successful voiceover experience I've ever had be one that I didn't actually have to audition for, because normally you audition for everything. You audition for 99% of it, and 1% you may get. So to have the one that actually ended up being the big kahuna, as they say, was a game that I never auditioned for.
So how do you get into character? Do you have to delve deeply into the right mindset when you're playing the Master Chief?
Well, it was sort of it sort of gravitated to that. When I went in and read for the first game, for Combat Evolved, Marty and I would sit down and and you have to understand, he didn't have a visual image to show me of Master Chief or of any of the game, really. They were very early in the process. And all he had for me was the basic storyline, and then a description, as he saw it, of who Master Chief was. And his description of the character was, he said, think of Clint Eastwood. And when Clint Eastwood was doing what we call the spaghetti westerns, for a few dollars more and Fistful of Dollars, and those movies. And if you remember that character, he was a character that said very little. He didn't have a lot of speaking lines, but when he did speak, somebody usually got killed. And so he said, think of that character when you're trying to, sort of get a sense of who Master Chief was. So that was the launching point for me, for getting into character. And then with each passing game and going into each session, there was more information to draw from. And one of the beautiful things about Halo is the whole Halo universe has grown so much, and it really started from the very first game, to where there's books and there's animated series and there's cartoon books and whatever. And the story has really fleshed out, and that gave me a lot of great source material going into Halo 2 and Halo 3 and 4 and 5. So, having that source material to draw from, I was able to do things that would help me get into character and to understand, the character, more with each passing game.
Working on the first game, was that a solo gig or were you with the other voice actors in the studio?
Actually, they were up until Halo 4, they were all solo gigs. And Halo 1 was very much a solo gig. I would get a script and read my lines and that was usually a day or two's work. And then I'd come back for, what I used to call the death sessions, which is when Master Chief, when the player screws up and Master Chief gets killed. You have to have the sounds for that, death by fire, death by falling off the cliff, death by phaser, death by, there was all that, you have to come up with all those kind of things. That could actually be a stressful day's work. You don't think of voiceover as being stressful, but those days were. So there was a lot of, just different things that you would have to do to sort of get yourself into that place where you could take the character to wherever he needed to get to.
What are your thoughts on the Master Chief's character, not to mention the Master Chief leaving such a large impact on the gaming community ever since Halo was released?
In terms of the character, there's two things that come to mind. One is for me to have the opportunity to play a role in what has become a very iconic character in the gaming world has been an honor and privilege beyond description. I mean, it's really like, when I was a kid, our superheroes were Superman and Batman and Spider-Man. And, these were the comics that I read. And like any other kid growing up, you sort of envision yourself being that character and what that would be like. And now, many years later, and me much more long in the tooth than I was back in those days, it is a lot of sort of fulfilling a childhood fantasy of being able to have a role in what has become, sort of the Superman or the Batman of this era, and to be, connected to it in some way that, that he's had so much success. As like I said, it's been just an honor. But in talking about the actual character and what I think of him, I think he's a much more complicated character than a lot of people give him credit for. The fact that Master Chief, up until Halo 4, certainly didn't have a lot of lines and he didn't say much. It was easy for people to sort of dismiss him as just like, well, he's just, he's a super soldier and he's got a big gun and, he mows down a lot of people. And I mean, if you don't look at it any further than that, that's fine. But I think that what makes him interesting is there's a lot more behind the scenes there that you as a participant, you as a player, get to, sort of fill in. I think one of the ingenious things that Bungie did was to never reveal Master Chief's face. And I think that has allowed the gamer to project their own image into him rather than some predetermined look or attitude. You get to project your own sort of thoughts and feelings and even physicality into the character. And I think that's because, you know what, at the end of the day, when you play a video game, it can be a very solo experience, not unlike when you're voicing on, when you're doing voiceover. And you ask me, if doing Master Chief, has been a solo experience, and for the most part it has been. And it's interesting because for the most part, playing it is a solo experience. I mean, I understand that, it's developed into much more of a community now, but it can still be a one-on-one kind of trip. And so it is when you're actually recording the lines for the character. So there's sort of a simpatico between what I'm doing when I'm voicing Master Chief and what you're doing when you're playing Halo behind Master Chief. And it's sort of interesting that those two things sort of collide, if you will.
Now, when I was doing a bit of research, trying to sort out some questions, I read on the internet somewhere that Bungie were intending on getting a different voice for the Master Chief in Halo True. Now, is this true, or did the internet lie to me?
It's pretty true, yes. It was actually Halo 2. Um, and I only learned this. I was on a panel with Marty O'Donnell for the 10th anniversary. Or no, I'm sorry. It was when Halo 4 came out. My local paper here, the Chicago Tribune, did a big story on me and Halo, the Halo series and video games in general, and interviewed Marty in the process. And Marty told them, he never told me this, but he said that after Halo 1, they were completely taken off guard that the game became so big. They didn't really have any big plans to do a second game. They just wanted to do a really good first, Halo Combat Evolved and move on to the next thing. Well, the game became such an immediate success that they had to start thinking about, a sequel. And one of the first, one thing that they thought of was replacing somebody like me or somebody like Jen Taylor, who is the voice of Cortana, and some of the other voice actors, and use, Hollywood celebrities as was the, that started the, back in that period of time, that started to become a thing where, Hollywood celebrities and movie stars would voice video game characters. And they thought, well, we should do this with Halo now that it's like a big success. Fortunately for me, cooler minds prevailed, and the basic takeaway was, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And the feeling was that the game has been so successful, why start monkeying with it now and changing things when obviously people liked it the way it was? And so fortunately for me, they decided to keep all of us, and particularly Jen and I, and we've ended up voicing it ever since. And I think also when 343 took over, when Microsoft took over the Halo franchise and Bungie stepped away, they again started looking at the possibility of changing some of the voice actors, and actually started moving in that direction. They had other people picked out and who had done some work on the game and all of that. The problem was when they sort of beta tested the game, people didn't like the fact that it wasn't the same voices. And so they came back and had Jen and I reprise our roles as the characters in the game. So we owe a lot to the fans for keeping us involved with Halo, and it's something that I am forever grateful for.
Perish the thought, of course, of actually getting, Hollywood superstars to start voicing characters in the Halo series. I mean, I can only imagine what kind of ideas must have came into Bungie's minds, like, okay, who should we get to voice the Master Chief right now? Steve Downes? No. He's not from Hollywood. Let's get the first guy from this movie's credit list. Nicolas Cage. That's probably a good choice. Let's get him on board.
The name Tom Cruise was kicked around, from what I understand. I don't know if that's actually true, but I have heard that his name was kicked around as a possibility for Master Chief. So take that with whatever grain of salt you care to give it.
After Halo 3 was done and dusted, there wasn't actually much to hear or see from the Master Chief in a while, but as you say, Bungie turned into 343 Industries, the game went over into their lap, fourth game in development, but when you were given that role, once again, when you were actually given that chance to reprise the role of the Master Chief, did you feel confident about doing it after all these years?
Well, yes, I did. I'm not sure they did, but I certainly did. And I was delighted when I got a glimpse of what the story was going to be for Halo 4. I was so excited about being able to, sort of flesh out this character beyond what we were able to do in the first three games. So, no, it was very interesting. I actually, you asked me earlier about it. What was it like auditioning? And I told you I never auditioned for Halo 1, but I did audition for Halo 4. they didn't really call it an audition, but it was. And mainly because the character was going to, they were really going to broaden his sort of emotional scope. And they wanted to see, I think, if I was up for it. And if I could pull off what it was, where they were going to take this character, because it was going to be more than just me grunting out Cortana every 5 minutes and little one-liners. And so when we did this little quote unquote test, it was described to me as this was a technical test. It had to do with some technical equipment, and would I mind voicing this just to see if all this works? Well, what it really was an audition to see if I could take the chief in a more emotional direction. And we ended up doing some of the lines that were more or less very similar to the lines in the very end of the game of Halo 4 when Cortana is dying and all that. And I mean, to answer your question, I was more than ready for it, and I couldn't wait to get in it, and I'm just glad that everybody liked what the end result was.
So did you feel pressured with the more dramatic moments in the game, or did you think, that sounds like a new and fresh challenge to me, I'll give it a crack?
Well, I'd like to say the latter. I think there was probably some part of me that that's the thing about any kind of, thing that you do in the entertainment business. And I'm sure you've felt this at one time or another, that little voice in the back of your head that says, you're not up for this. You can't do this. You're not going to be able to get there. And the challenge, of course, for any actor, no matter what it is you're doing, is to be able to put that voice down and bring up the voice that says, yeah, this is going to be fun. This character, this approach, let's give it all you got. And at the end of the day, that's really where it went. And I was pretty happy with how it all ended up.
Halo 5 caught a bit of flack for its advertising because it was saying that the player was to find the truth about the Master Chief, even though not much of that really happened. So
Not really. Not really.
So, was that apparent when you were voicing that one, or did you only know a chunk of what was going on based on what you were given?
No, I didn't, because a lot of the promo stuff that you ended up seeing and the commercial stuff you ended up seeing, we did before I went in to do lines for the game. So no, I mean, to answer your question, no, I didn't know that it was going to be drastically different, that the trailer stuff, the promo stuff was not necessarily going to reflect what was actually going on in the game. And I think everybody, when it was all said and done, sort of regretted that approach. And it was with all good intentions, and it wasn't completely devoid of truth. What you saw in the promotional stuff, that was not the focus of the game. And I think that's where people sort of got upset about it, is they thought the game was going in this direction, and it really kind of didn't go in that direction, if that makes any sense.
Do you ever see the Halo series actually ending in the future, or do you think that the Master Chief may officially die a hero's death someday?
Well, that's, of course, the million-dollar question, and I don't have a definitive answer to it. I mean, I think, all good things come to an end at some point. And this is just a personal feeling of mine. This is not any, I'm not speaking for anybody else other than myself, but here's the best example I can come up with. Game of Thrones. All right, Game of Thrones is this hugely successful series, right? And if they wanted to milk that for another 2 or 3 seasons, they could do it. HBO would probably buy into it. They could develop some storyline that would keep it going, whatever. But to the credit of the creators and the showrunners, they decided this was as far as it was going to go. So the upcoming season of Game of Thrones next year will be it. And I admire that, because they're probably walking away from a lot of money, but they're keeping the creative integrity of the show intact. and it won't go to that point where you're going to go, Jesus, are they still doing this? And I like that. I like that they've done that. And I would think with Halo, at some point, there should be an end to it. And you mentioned, somebody asked me this a long time ago about, where I saw Master Chief going, and in my own personal opinion, yeah, considering he is sort of the classic mythical hero in the classical definition of that word, he should probably die a hero's death. I have no idea whether that's going to happen, but I would like to think that whether it's that or he rides off into the sunset with Cortana, I don't know, but I think there probably should be at some point a finality to it, and whether that happens in the next game or 3 games from now, hopefully there'll be some logic to it, some point where it will feel like this is the end of the story at this point, and then let it go from there.
I'm sure 343, if they do actually decide to give the Chief a hero's death, like a proper swan song, anything like that, I do trust them in putting in like a good old grand final act for the character. I doubt they're going to be like, just have maybe the Master Chief on camera and say, "Hey Chief, looks like you've got something to say, do you?" "Yes, I certainly do." Turns to camera. "I have to go now. My planet needs me."
No, I like that. I think you may have stumbled into something there.
Oh no, I just leaked Halo 6's ending. Oh darn.
Yeah, have him break the fourth wall and,
just
pop off the helmet and say, "Well, kids, we're wrapping it up here. I don't know what the rest of you guys are doing, but I'm out of here."
A very crudely little piece of paper kind of appears on the screen. It says, "Master Chief died on his way to his home planet. The end." Dun-dun-dun-dun. Dun-dun-dun-dun.
I don't think people would be too happy with that ending, but we'll see. We'll see what they decide to do. There's a lot of really, creative minds at work, and one of the cool things, I know Bungie was this way, and 343 is certainly this way. They really do listen to the fans, and that makes it fun for us who are involved with it, because they listen to the feedback and take that into consideration going forward into the next project. So the thing about gamers is they don't lack for an opinion. And if they got something to say, you're going to hear it. And I appreciate that, and I think it's great, and I'm glad there's an avenue for it,
Were there any standout moments in the series? Perhaps any favorite lines that stood out to you?
I always defer to the lines that stand out for the fans. Those, I mean, be honest with you, when I first started doing the game, and this is not unusual for voiceover talent, no matter what you're doing, is once the project's over, it's over. And, I'm not the type that would, remember lines and stuff like that. So the lines that are important to me are the ones that are important to the fans, and they dictate what means something to them. And if it means something to them, then it means something to me. And they've made that determination, and I back it up 100%.
Have you played much of the Halo games, or would you not call yourself a gamer?
I would not call myself a gamer. You know what? When Halo 2 came out, that's when I sort of made a decision. I really need to find out what the heck's going on here. And because I was not a gamer, I wasn't a gamer going in. And after Halo 1, it's not like it drew me into the gaming community. It didn't. But when Halo 2 came out, I said, well, Steve, you need to really, find out how, what's going on here. And I got myself an Xbox and got the game and tried to play it. And Jake, I was so horrible at it. I thought, okay, the learning curve on this for me is going to be so steep. It will take me years to be mediocre. And I made a decision at that point. I said, you cannot be mediocre at this game. You either have to be very good or don't play it at all. And I didn't really like my chances of being very good at it. So I made a conscious decision not to really try to play it. The few times that I did, I was awful. And I thought, this is, and then actually the very first appearance I ever made on behalf of Master Chief was at there was a guy called me up in Miami, and he was opening a video game store, and he asked me if I would come down and be a part of the grand opening. And I had never done anything like that prior. And I said, okay, fine. I mean, I was up here in Chicago, and it was wintertime, and he was going to fly me down to Miami. So that's all I needed to know. But I said, I don't dress up as the character, and I don't play the game. Well, he completely ignored the second thing. And unbeknownst to me, he had a contest that the winner of which was going to play me at Halo. And when I found this out, I said, dude, I don't play the game. I'm horrible at it. This will be a huge disappointment to whoever wins the game. And he said, don't worry about it. We've rigged it. There's a guy behind the curtain over here. It was literally like a Wizard of Oz thing. There's a guy behind the curtain. He's a pro player. He's a pro gamer. He will play for you. You'll just be holding a dead controller in your hands and pressing buttons. They'll never know the difference. So I said, well, okay, if you say so. So anyway, the person who won the right to play me at Halo was this 11-year-old girl. And we started playing the game, and the guy's, my, double behind the screen, he's doing his best. Consequently, I lasted about 15 seconds, and this girl wiped the floor with the both of us. And you have never been more humiliated than have an 11-year-old girl look at you like, wow, you're the Master Chief, huh? Whoa, impressive. And that was absolutely my last experience at getting anywhere near an Xbox controller in front of anybody.
It takes a big man to admit these things. Thank God none of this was recorded, especially your first time actually playing Halo, because I can just imagine.
Yes.
Maybe the game kind of going, all right then, Chief, you're going to have to shoot those guys up. No, that's the ceiling, Chief. Shoot.
That's not going to happen. But Jake, the thing is, I first of all, I have the tremendous admiration for men and women who are good at this, because it does take a skill, and it's a skill that I don't have, and it's one that I admire. But what really drew me to the game in the first place, and way back with Halo 1 and continuing to the present day, was the story. And I love the story. The story, I was just so fascinated by it and so deep into it. And I was always a science fiction fan anyway, growing up. And so that's what really pulled me in. And my feeling is, I'll give you the best that I can give you in fleshing out this story. And then it's up to you to shoot straight and, win the game. But I'll do my part, and then it's up to the gamers to do their part.
So have you been to many game conventions around the world? Have you met with a lot of the fans as well?
A lot, yeah. I've been all over the world. Sadly, not to London, and I'm hoping that will change at some point. But I've never been invited to the big. I know you have several big conventions there that I'd love to be a part of someday, and hopefully that'll happen. But I've been, in fact, this year I was back in New Zealand for the second time. I was in Australia for the second time. Done a lot of dates up in Canada and all over the United States and Mexico. And it's been it's been fun, first of all. And it's really helped me, to be able to, be in close quarters with a lot of really dedicated fans. It's really helped me understand Master Chief's impact on the gaming community, and I enjoy the conventions. I don't do a lot of them, but I do enough that I'm able to be in touch with the people that this game means so much to, and consequently, it really helps me to understand the character, and I think bring some of that enthusiasm when it's time to go in and start recording for him.
This little tidbit happened back in 2011. Now, during the lead up to an upcoming sequel to a certain iconic 90s shooter series called Duke Nukem Forever.
Yeah.
Yeah, as the titular protagonist, he certainly poked fun at the Master Chief and, well, generally speaking, also protagonists who wear power armor. I'm sure fans will hopefully know and remember that infamous quote. You know, when Duke Nukem spotted the Master Chief armor sitting in the locker and said, "Hey, Duke, you want some armor?" He said a rather rude quip about people who wear power armor. I'm guessing you heard anything about that, and if so, how did you react?
To be honest with you, Jake, I haven't. I have not. I've heard about it, but I've never heard the actual quote.
Do you want me to put on my best
means.
Duke quote? Yes, well, so what happened was, like I say, Duke walks over, and this was advertised in, the pre-release E3 stuff as well, and a soldier goes, "Hey, Duke, I got your power armor, you want it?" And Duke very coolly goes, and I pardon my French in advance, everyone, "Power armor is for pussies." And, the soldier, a bit stunned, goes, "Okay, you want a gun instead?"
Well, I would say this to Duke. Duke, bring it.
Nice. Duke versus Master Chief. It must happen. WrestleMania.
It must happen.
No mercy. 1-on-1.
Absolutely.
Okay, now, when you're not voice acting or doing radio or the like, how do you like to unwind?
Nothing really outrageous. I like to play golf. My wife and I do a little bit of traveling, and like to. I'm a big bicyclist, and nothing really outrageous. Just as much physical activity as I can. Possibly get in. I like to swim and things like that. So I'm a big movie buff. But, just kind of everyday stuff, really.
Okay, now for the final question. To help round all this off, is there anything you'd like to say to the wonderful Halo fanbase out there?
Well, I sort of hinted to it earlier, Jake. I'm a big fan of the Halo fans. And they have, through the years, here we are talking, 17 years, going on 17 years of this. And I've been fortunate enough to be part of, what has been a tremendous experience with Halo. And more importantly, to be able to, meet so many of the fans and the people who this game means so much to. And it's that part of it, in all honesty, has been an honor. And then to be able to be involved in this game is just an absolute blast. And just every part of it, leading up to recording it, then the promotion that goes around the presentation of the next game, and then the conventions and all that stuff. It's just it's a thrill that it's sometimes hard to express, but it's all due to the fans out there who have taken to this game and to whom it means so much. And I guess all I can say is thank you. And we will continue this fight for as long as we can.
Let me just say, Steve, thank you so much for coming to the show. It's been an absolute blast chatting to you.
My pleasure, Jake. The thrill was all mine, man.
And I'd also like to thank my wonderful listeners out there for once again tuning into this great interview right here on The Cyberden, your weekly dose of tech and games. So thanks for coming, Steve, and watch out for those Covenant.
Jake, you finish this fight. Chief, out.